if it doesn't seem like there's any progress on a ceasefire deal, what was the point of this call today?
Well, I mean, it's good that the sides keep talking and they're, agreeing at least to that they want, in theory, to have a solution to the war, to an end to the war. And I think what you have is President Putin willing to humor President Trump a little bit. He knows that President Trump wants a better relationship. He wants to reset relations with the Russians. And so he's willing to talk to him. But again, as Keir said, on his terms. Right. There was no progress today. They were obviously on opposite sides. You have the U.S. and Ukraine and the Europeans wanting this 30-day ceasefire. And President Putin said no.
Right.
So until he gets what he wants, which is basically Ukraine's unconditional surrender, with a lot more territory than they even have now, the talks aren't going anywhere. So I think what President Putin is trying to do is keep the idea of talks alive and keep humoring the United States, because now, President Trump, Vice President Vance, they're talking about sanctions. They're talking about maybe walking away. Vladimir Putin doesn't want the international community to walk away. He wants to keep them at the table. But really, it's just kind of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, maybe expand on that a little bit, because I'm a little perplexed because we've heard the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, say the same thing. Now we hear Vance saying it as well, that the United States might just, get out of this game and leave it to them to decide. How does that work as a leverage point in these talks?
Well, the question is, when the U.S. says it's going to walk away, what does that mean?
Right.
Does it mean that it's hands off, you guys go keep killing each other and we're done with it? Or is the U.S. going to walk away but continue to support Ukraine, to continue to give that aid, to continue to give them weapons, to work with the Europeans on additional sanctions? That might not be so bad for the Ukrainians, because right now the Russians have the upper hand. If the U.S. is just going to walk away and leave the Ukrainians to fend for themselves, that's essentially giving a victory to Putin. So I don't think the Ukrainians certainly don't want the U.S. to walk away. Would Vladimir Putin want the U.S. to walk away and be able to do what he wants? Because, as Keir said, he does think he can have victory on the battlefield. But, look, the sanctions are continuing to hurt Russia. He would like to have a better relationship with the U.S. So I think he's going to keep inching along, making it like he's going to talk. But, unless there's someone that's really going to crack those skulls and get together, I don't see the Ukrainians and the Russians being able to get it together themselves.
Of those two paths you described, though, of the United States walking away, I mean, Putin has to be aware of what's happening on this side of the Atlantic, right? He knows that there's not any sort of inertia by congressional Republicans to continue the funding to help support Ukraine, right? I mean, is that a bet he might be willing to take for the U.S. to walk away?
Well, I think you see President Trump as his unpredictable, right? Why were Republicans so reticent? Because the MAGA crowd was reticent. Because President Trump was reticent.
Yeah.
I think you've heard President Trump over the last, 6 weeks or so, coming to the conclusion that, I really want to be friends with Vladimir Putin. He's, want to be best friends. He could be playing me.
Yeah.
And so if President Trump is going to, start to lose favor with President Putin, he might want to get tough. And then, the Republicans, as we've seen since he could fall in line. And then you see Republicans wanting to throw money at Ukraine like they used to.
Yeah, he definitely has the ability to move mountains when it comes to congressional Republicans.
I think he's starting to, realize what's really going on. And look, President Trump, again, really is enamored of this strongman President Putin, but he doesn't like to look like a chump, and he doesn't like to look like a loser. And so if he can get the better of Vladimir Putin, I think he may try to do it.
Well, we'll see. That'd be a remarkable about face. But Elise Labott, your expertise is always appreciated.
Good to be with you.
Thanks for being here.